Auspicious greetings, everyone. Welcome back to our Dharma with streaming, Nagasena Bhikshu Sutra. Today will be our class 5, the 5th class. And in class 4, the last class, we talk about the dialogue between King Milanda and Nagasena Bhikshu on the topic of wisdom, faith, good and bad deeds, merits and demerits. So through last class, we have an understanding about the prajna. So what is prajna? The wisdom of what? Not the circular knowledge, but rather the wisdom of the understanding of the truth of this phenomenon, which including us, the impermanence, the interdependence relationship, and nirvana. And also in order for us to liberate out from the circle of birth and death or suffering, we have to, in the beginning, in the first place, is that we must have faith. If we don't believe in there's a nirvana, there's a chance to liberate out from the suffering, then there's nothing to say. So faith, the faith that we believe in the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. But the Buddha is the one that teach us, guide us, provide us the information of how to eliminate our suffering. The Dharma is the method that we can apply in our daily life to reduce the suffering and ultimately eliminate the suffering. And the Sangha are the representatives of the Buddha. In a way, is to guide us in the path of cultivation. So faith is important. And also we talk about the merits and the demerits. So a wise person, when commit into the evil action, will the merits be reduced, or good actions. Same as the ignorant person committed into an evil action, will their merits be demerits, greater or lesser? So we had this discussion last class from their dialogue. And in this class, we are going to explore a few other topics, what they discuss about. So the topics will be the soul and consciousness, time, liberation, and also the memories, the memories and the mind, the relationship between the memories and the mind. So that will be something that we will discuss in this class. So a lot of people have questions about soul, and other religions talk about soul. Does Buddhism talks about soul as well? And what is soul? So the king have this question as well. Is there a soul in a man of this world? Is there a man with the soul of this world? And Nagasena said that by analysis and examination, there is no soul in a man of this world. What can we call a soul? What can we call a soul? In us as a living beings, do we have a soul with us, or soul belongs to a dead person? So Milanda said that is the life or living principle in the body of a man called a soul. Living principle in a way means the consciousness, the memories in the body of the man called the soul. Can we call that in us, there's a soul in us? Nagasena did not answer, but rather he asked, can the living principle in a man see the material forms through eyes, hear sound through ears, smell odor through nose, taste flavor through tongue, Feel smoothness and softness through body. Think over some objects with mind. Can the consciousness, the memory in us, see the material form through our eyes, hear things through our ears, smell through our nose, taste through our tongue, and feel things through our body, and also think things through our mind? And the king said, yes, it could. Then Nagasena asked, now you and I are sitting in this palace with windows open to the 4 directions. All the windows are open. Is it possible for us to see what we want to see through any windows we like? And King Milander said that, yes, we can. So Nagasena says, suppose the living principles in the body of a man can see through any orifice, means the whole of a body freely. Suppose that this consciousness in the body, and then there's a hole, a small hole, can see through this small hole of a body freely. Just a small hole. Can it see the material forms through the eyes? Can it see the material forms through the ears? Can it see the material forms through the nose, to the mouth, body, and mind? And the king said, no, it cannot. Why it cannot? Because it's a small holes. It's different from the doors so open with the 4 directions opened. This is a small holes. And then actually Nagasena give a lot of different example with the questions to ask the king. And in the end, the king said that, well, you raise up a lot of samples, you ask a lot of questions, but I still don't get what you're trying to say. I still don't get what you're trying to say, because you keep asking about me seeing, using my eyes to see, my nose to smell, etc. The king still don't understand. So the king said that, why don't you explain it directly? And this is what Nagasena says. When a man sees the material forms with his own eyes, the organ, the eyes organ, then the eyes consciousness arises. The eyes consciousness arises. Due to the rising of the eyes consciousness, there arise painful or pleasant feelings. I mean, like or dislike feelings. So it needs to have the eyes organs with the eyes consciousness arising together. Then there will be feelings coming out. Then the mind and the thoughts comes into context. See, the mind and the thoughts comes into contact. It is the same with regards to ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. When the mind comes in contact with mind's object, then mind consciousness arises. Then, due to the arising of mind consciousness, there arise painful and pleasant feeling. From painful and pleasant feeling, there arises thoughts. From thoughts, there arises mindfulness. Thus, it's continuous without a soul. So, let me do some elaboration. In their understanding is that a soul is something which is like fixed, it won't change. It won't change. But in us, inside us, our perceptions to anything that comes to us, whether it's a physical things, whether it's a smell, whether it's a taste or anything, when we interact with this thing, it will get into our organs. So if it's a odor, smell type of things, it will get into our nose. Okay, when you get into our nose, then we start to have what? The nose consciousness arises. When it arises at the same time, actually it's very fast. It's very fast that the thoughts and mind start to arise too. And we start to have a differentiation of this thing, whether we like it or we don't like it. So if there's a soul in there, we won't have all this reaction. We won't have all this reaction. It's because of all these cause and conditions comes together, then we have all this reaction, and then it will come back, mental reaction, and then come back into our mind again. And if we attach to certain things, this thing that I don't like. So when if let's say the durian, smelly things, I don't use the durian, I use some other things, which is the smell is not comfortable. So when we smell it, we dislike it. So the smell get into my nose organ, and my nose organ interact with the consciousness that I have this memory that this is smelly. This is smelly. I dislike it. So I dislike it. If I'm attached to this dislike, I will add more memories of dislike into my mind. So the thought arises, I dislike it. But if I attach to it, it will add more into it, and I get more dislike it. But if I want to stop it, so I won't react on it. When I say I won't react, means that I know that it's smelly, it doesn't smell good, but I'm not going to add more unpleasant dislike reaction, mental reaction into my mind. So this is how, in a way, is that we can stop to add more unnecessary or unnecessary attachments to certain things. So that's why in here it says that thus it's continuous without a soul. A soul, in a way, in their understanding, is something that is inside, and then it won't let things change it. So in Buddhism, mentality is talking about consciousness, the memories that have in us that were brought us from life to another life. That's the memories. And these memories will change all the time, depends on how we react to it. So in here, so let's do some elaboration here. So there are 6 objects. The 6 objects: the visible object, sound, smells, taste, touch, mental objects. So all the external factors. External factors means that things we see. The sound that being created by other factors. For example, somebody horned the car. It's a sound, but it's by other external factors. The smells of a thing. For example, the blue cheese, the durian, all kinds of smells. The rose flower smell from the external object. The taste from the food, also external objects. Touch, anything that we touch, a cat, a dog, a computer, a laptop, anything that we use our body to touch it, external factors. And the mental object. Mental object means that things that comes up from the mind, from this mind. So these are the external factors. External factors interact when our body, the 6 sense organs, when our 6 sense interact with the external objects, which we experience this every minute, every second. And then when it interact at the same time, the 6 consciousness start to arise. So if we use eyes to see things, the eyes consciousness arise as well. That's why we are able to differentiate whether this is a black things or white thing, a blue things. The eyes organ is just an organ. The Consciousness is the one that have the memory, they're able to differentiate. And where does this consciousness memories comes from? From the past lives plus this life's information get together. So our feeling of like, dislike, happy, sad, sorrow, anger, anything, any feeling, are the arising of the consciousness, the memory in the consciousness. So the same thing for the ear. Anything that we hear through the ear organ, the ear consciousness will arise as well. Same as the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind consciousness. So it's just like a radar. It's just like a radar. It's so fast that we won't know when it starts and how it flows. It's just like a circle. It's just like a circle. It interact in, interact out. Interacting in and out. In and out. So then King Milanda asked this question. When visual consciousness arises, does mental consciousness also arise at the same time? So when we see things, we have this eyes organ, and then immediately the eyes consciousness arises. At the same time, does this mind consciousness also arise at the same time together? Nagasena said that yes, they arise together. Minenda said that which consciousness arises first? These are something that we always like to ask. Which one comes first? Which one comes first? And I always say that it's just so important to know that which one comes first. The lightning and the sound of the lightning, the thunder. Which one comes first? The thunder comes first, then the lightning, or the lightning comes first, then the thunder. The same thing is that in this world, we have egg first or we have chicken first. Because the chicken comes from the egg. But egg also comes from the chicken. So which one comes first? We always like to ask this question. But does that anything to do with our challenge in our daily life? Even if I know that which one comes first, will it help me to reduce more suffering? So this is the questions that we have to ask ourselves, is that when we start with certain curiosity, is it worth to spend time to explore into it? Is it worth? So Nagasena say that the visual consciousness arises first, then mental consciousness second. That's what he said. And then Minanda said, if so, does the visual consciousness speaks to the mind consciousness? Where I arise, you likewise arise. Or does the mind consciousness speaks to the eyes consciousness? Where you arise, I will likewise arise. No, they do not speak to each other. They do not speak to each other. And then the Minanda asks is that, Venerable Sir, you have said that they arise at the same time. Why is there no communication between the one and the others? See, it's quite contradicting. Because in the beginning, they say that, okay, they arise together. Nagasena already said that it arise together, but this king still want to insist to know that which one comes first. So Nagasena said that, okay, the visual consciousness comes first. And then the mental comes second. Okay, since it's something that the eyes see it first interact with the eyes consciousness. Then it get into the mind consciousness to differentiate things. And in here, then Minanda asked this question is that, well, in this case is that, do they communicate with each other? Will the visual consciousness say that, you know what, mind consciousness, now I arise. It's time for you to arise too. Or the mind says that, the mind consciousness speaks to the eye consciousness, says that where you arise, since you arise, I will also arise. It's time for me to arise. And then Nagasena said that, well, okay, they don't talk to each other. And then King Milanda said that, but you say that they arise at the same time. Why don't they communicate with each other? Why don't they communicate with each other? Don't you think that this conversation is a little bit challenging? Because our body function, especially the interactions with the mind, it is very, very fast function. Very fast. So it does not just in one direction, but it's in a circle type of interaction. Interaction that is so fast that most of the time, we actually have no idea that which one starts first. But at least we know something is that when the external object interact with the sense organs, at the same time, the consciousness will arise. But since the first interaction is by the eyes, the visual, then the next one that comes together will be the visual consciousness. And at the same time, the mind consciousness also arises to do the differentiation. Do the differentiation and also to make the decision on whether I want to attach to it or whether I want to let go about it. So this is something is that it happens so fast. So fast that it's almost at the same time. And that's why actually Nagasena, in a way, is that he's telling in the beginning is that they arise at the same time. And then after that, since the king asks this question again, who comes first? And I said that, okay, the visual consciousness comes first. And then he asked whether they talk to each other. And then Nagasena said that, no, they don't talk to each other. The reason is because it's too fast. Our mind functions very fast. The consciousness functions very fast. And that's why we need to meditate. We need meditation. Why do we need meditation? We need to slow down our mind in order for us to concentrate in our mind and think. What should we do next? What should we do next? But most of the time, actually, when it comes to our mental consciousness, if in our past life we are so attached to certain things, when we interact with the external factors or the objects, immediately we pull out the one that we attach to. Whether we like it or don't like it, we immediately pull out, and then immediately our body has the reaction. It's so fast. So we need to meditate. Actually, in a way, is to slow down and train to focus. Focus, and then after that, make decision in our life. So this is, in a way, is very important in our cultivation. Okay, next, we're going to explore the topic that raised up by King Milanda about time. About time. So, King Milanda asks Nagasena, what is mean by time? What is the meaning of time? Nagasena says that concerning the past things, we speak in reference to time. Concerning the future things, we also speak in reference to time. Concerning the present things, we speak without referring to time. Without referring to time. So what it's saying is that, what is time? Time is about past, present, and future. If there's no past, no present, and no future, then there's nothing we call it as time. Then there's nothing we call it as time. And then King Milanda asks, Venerable, consider, is there time which exists? Is there really time that exists? Nagasena said that there's time which exists, there's time which does not exist. Time, it exists, but it also does not exist. And Milanda asks, King asks, which time exists and which does not? Nagasena says that regarding the person who has attained nirvana, time does not exist. But regarding the person who has not attained the path and still subject to birth and death, time exists. If a person in this life delight in giving and is filial too. So, what does it mean? It means that when a person that already reached to nirvana, actually time to this person is not that important. It doesn't really exist, whether it's today or tomorrow or the past. But for a person like us who have not attained the path, we still have a lot of defilement. We still have the life to live in this life. We have worries. We have plan. We have dream. And that's why we are still in the circle of samsara, birth and death, and times exist. So when we are still breathing, we are still alive, we still have a tomorrow, maybe. Then there's a tomorrow, such thing called time tomorrow. But all of us know that our ultimate path is death. It's death. So when we talk about death, it's also something related to time as well. So that's why time exists in us. And then King Milanda asks, what is the root cause of past things, of present things, of future things? What is the cause of past, present, and future? What is the cause? Nagasena says, ignorance is the root cause of past, future, and present things. Ignorance. Because of ignorance, the spirits comes into beings, conditions by spirits. The body comes into beings, conditioned by body. Names comes into beings, conditioned by names. Forms comes into beings, conditions by form. The sixth sense knowledge comes into beings. The eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. The sixth sense knowledge. So what does this mean here? It means that because we have this thoughts of having this body attached to this form. So because we attach to this form and we're still breathing, our eyes are still opening, our ears still can hear. So things becomes what? Important to us. And then things become important to us, we start to plan about it. We start to worry about it. And then it also becomes a memory to us. So that's why the roots of having this time, the past, future, and present, is because of our actions, how we treat this life. We thought that is truth forever there. And that's why we chase after the time. The six sense organs all open into the outside world. How do they open to the outside world? The eyes see forms, the ear listens to sound, the nose smelled odor, the tongue tastes savours, the body feel touch of smoothness. The mind inclines towards craving. So there are 6 outside. These are the 6 outside things. Going towards the objects is called flowing. When these flowing are joined together, one is able to know suffering and happiness. When we interact with the external objects, we are able to know that whether we are happy or we are not happy. From suffering and happiness, there comes craving. From craving come lustful desire. From lustful desire comes becoming. From becoming comes birth. From birth comes old age. From old age comes sickness. Comes disease or sickness. From disease or sickness comes death. From death comes lamentations. From lamentations comes grieving. From grave comes inner despairs. So these are the whole package of our life, of why we keep rebirth again and again, from the interaction with the external factors. And then this external factors interact with our sense organs, get into our consciousness, and in our consciousness, we know that whether we are happy or unhappy, we like it or we don't like it. And then it starts to have this suffering and happiness arises. The things that we want, we crave for it. We crave for it, and then the desire arises. And when the desire arises, we want more. So we find ways to get it. And then start to have this birth, old age, sickness, and death. And then grave, sadness, again and again and again. So how do we able to reduce or stop the suffering? How do we stop the suffering? This is something that the Buddha has been trying to search for. And this is something that if we want to liberate out from suffering or even the circle of birth and death, we have to cultivate where to stop it. Where to stop it. This is something that we will discuss in our future class. So all these sufferings of lives comes together is called a man. So we are living in a situation with a lot of challenge that make our life uncomfortable. Dukkha. So in English, it translates as suffering, but in Sanskrit, it's called dukkha, something that makes us uncomfortable, something that blocks us to feel comfortable. Because of all these worries and suffering, the man is subject to birth and death without an end. Therefore, the same old body of a man cannot be obtained. Cannot be obtained. So this uncomfortable feeling that will brought us to endless of birth and death. And the goal of cultivation in Buddhism is to find ways to reduce the suffering, to eliminate the suffering, and ultimately to be able to liberate out, to release out from this circle of birth and death. That is the objective. Okay, so now let's talk about liberation. Since just now we talked about liberation, so now let's talk about liberation. What is the difference between one who is liberated and one who is not liberated? The king asked. And Nagasena said, he who is not liberated has attachment and desire in his heart. He who is liberated is without attachment and desire in his heart, and he eats foods only for the sake of keeping alive. Still continue to live like a normal person. Still need to eat, still need to work, still need to earn money to eat and have a livelihood. But these persons are able to liberate even though they are still living in a normal life. And King says that I see people in the world craving for bodily pleasures, delicious food, and never being satisfied. Nagasena says, he who is not liberated wants to take delicious food for his fame, his happiness, and good taste. But he who is emancipated takes food not for his precious, but not for its delicious taste, but only for the sake of keeping the body alive. So how do we liberate? How do we liberate now in our life? And now in our life, how do we liberate it? We're still breathing. We're still living in this world, but can we liberate out? As according to that teachings, if one lead a simple life, one to reduce their craving, in a way, is a liberation. The same thing is that if we have a cell phone, if it's still functionable, why do we need to crave for a new version of iPhone? If I have a laptop, it can be used for Zooming, powerful enough for internet. Why do we need to buy a branded laptop? And then we find ways to earn money, to get money. And then we work so hard that it ends up that the body is not very good. Why? We don't need it. Unfortunately, we are chasing after all this craving. So it's just like eating a food. Even though we have a lot of delicious food in front of us, but how much can you eat? Your body, your stomach can only put in so much. Even you want to try eat everything, but you won't be, because your stomach will not listen to you. But we have the desire. We have the desire of eating a lot. And ends up, we get sick. So if we think carefully in it, you will be able to find ways to live a more simple life. A more simple life. And a way whereby we can achieve a certain degree of peace. A certain degree of peace. Okay, now we have another topic about memories and mind. King Milanda asks, why does one remember what is past and done long ago? Why one are able to remember the past and also what have been done long ago? And then Nagasena says, when a man is sorrowful, he remembers the things that took place in the distant past. So when things actually, we get hurt so deeply in our heart, we remember the thing that happens before, even it's long time ago, because it's really in the heart, deep inside it. And the king said that, how does he remember it? By the mind or by the memory? So Nagasena did not answer, but rather he asked the king, do you, O king, remember business that you have done in the past? Melinda said, yes, I learned something, but later I forgot it. I learned something, but I will forget it. This happens to us too. We forget a lot of things. We forget a lot of things. But are these things still in our mind? In a way, yes. Nagasena said that, at that time, O king, were you without a mind, or therefore you have forgotten? And therefore you have forgotten. And king said that, at that time I was without mindfulness, which means that the king did not really take it so serious about this thing. And then Nagasena said that, so then, great king, you have mindfulness. You still remember, but not so good. And King Milanda asked, is there mindfulness when a man does something, be it in the past or present? Are all things known by mindfulness? Which means that you are focused, mindful on it. And then Nagasena says that the past things are remembered by memories. We remember it because this thing happens before it get into our mind. And the present things are also remembered by memories. It gets into our consciousness. Get into our consciousness. Then Kim Milanda said that thus people only remember past things, but they can't remember new things. Nagasena said that if things newly done cannot be remembered, then there's no mindfulness. Then there's no mindfulness, which means that if a thing's newly done, just did it, but did not really put in the mind to remember it, it might not be remembered because there's no mindfulness. And Milanda said that, do people who newly learn books and craft remember? Nagasena said that people who newly learn books and craft have memory. So the disciple who have learned would know. Therefore, there is memories. Actually, in here, Nagasena is trying to trigger out King Milanda to think. Anything that happens before, whether it's in the past or even now, when we at this point of time having this conversation, it will be recorded in our memory. The only thing is that whether we are mindful enough or we are not mindful enough. If we are not mindful enough, the memory will be very light, easy to forget. But if we are mindful enough, it will get into our brain, into our consciousness, and then it will tag in, just like the picture here, tag in. We might forget it because it overlaps with each other. We might forget it, but sometimes when something trigger out, you realize something is that, how come I have this memory? I don't remember I have this memory, but how come it comes out? And we start to keep on try to recall back why I have this memory. And you realize something is that you can't recall back. You just know it. So this is something about when we are in mindful, we keep on building in strongly this memory. But if we are not mindful, this thing happen, it will still have some seeds plants in it, but we might not be able to remember so much. So be mindful is very important. So this is another topic, which is a very short topic, asked by the king. King Milanda asks, there is the expression, the ocean. Is it because of the water or other reason that this is called the ocean? He even asked this question. There's such thing called ocean. So is it because of the water there or other reason that this thing called an ocean? Nagasena said that it is called the ocean by man. Because there is just as much salt as water and just as much water as salt. So this term, in that time, of course, they used their language, but in translate into English, it's called the ocean. Why we have this term called ocean? Actually, it's created by man. And why it's called ocean? It definitely related to the salty taste of the ocean water. And then there's water and the salt and come up with this taste. And then at that time, the people create this term called ocean. So we have to understand something is that anything, actually say everything in this world are the creations by we human beings, especially the terminology. And everything does not just have one terminology. It will have different terms based on different country or different races or different culture. So that's the reason why in the beginning of the class, remember, King Milanda asked Nagasena, what is your name? And then Nagasena started to give the lecture to King Milanda about our identity. We don't have a fixed identity. Our identity comes from the creation of an external object. External object. So the parents give Nagasena a few names. Give Nagasena a few names. And later on, when this sutras translate into different languages, it has its own names as well, different pronunciation. However, each names also have a cause and condition. Just like Nagasena, this term means elephant. Why it have this name Nagasena? Because when he was born, a small elephant also was born. So that's why. So that's why the parents give his name the Nagasena. And Milanda asked that, what is the ocean or all of one taste? The taste of salt. Even he asked this question. Nagasena says that the water in the ocean is so tasty because it has been so for a very long time. And because fish and turtles and other insects makes it dirty, that's why it is salty. And that's today's topic. So in today's class, we discuss a few things. The soul, which is very difficult to actually to understand. Soul is very difficult to understand. In English, there's a definition of this soul, and this definition of this soul might not be the same as the understanding of the soul in the Indian mentality, same as in the Chinese mentality. We also have a discussion on the consciousness, which is this consciousness function, the external object, the sense organs, and the consciousness creates everything in our life and also lead us in the path of birth and death, might also lead us to end the paths of birth and death. Next, we also discuss about the time. So we're so concerned about the time, but for a practitioner, time is also just a symbol. And then we also talk about liberation. We are able to liberate even in now if we reduce our craving. What is liberation? When we live in the mind of peace, without trouble, without defilement, in a way, is liberation. In a way, it's liberation. So we don't think of liberation as a very superstitious style of things or very difficult to achieve. We think in this way is that if today I'm living in a peace mind, a happy mind, in a way, it's a liberation already. Because every day we are facing with all kinds of challenge. So if today the challenge get lesser, or when we face the challenge, we're able to transcend the way we are thinking. In a way, it's a liberation already. And also we talk about the memories and mind function. Last is the topic on the ocean, which is very interesting that the king will ask this question. Why the ocean is salty, which is quite interesting. So today we will end our class here. And then next class we'll continue to explore the Q&A between the king and the Bhikshu. Thank you very much. Om Mani Padme.